What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of MUT Tips. I'm your host, Sean Taylor from the Made Up Theater, and before we get started, make sure to like the video down below, comment with something you would like addressed in a future video, and as always, subscribe on YouTube to be informed of upcoming videos and live streams. Ring that bell. Now, let's jump into today's topic, the short-form game of replay. I got a request to go into some of my favorite short-form improv games, and one of those is replay, which is a game where you do a scene based on a suggestion from the audience, and about 90 seconds or so, not more than like 2 minutes. And then once the scene has concluded, you're gonna replay that exact same scene using some other suggestions from the audience. These suggestions might come in the form of emotions or genres, both film and literary. You might even grab some accents like celebrity voices or cartoon character voices, whatever you want. And then you're gonna replay that scene, 2, 3 times, however many times you want to, and it is affected by maybe one of the emotions or a few of those emotions, one of those genres, and maybe some of those accents as well. I love to use genres when I do the game of replay, but before we get to that, before we get to the game of the game, let's go to the foundation of this game, the neutral scene, the starting scene. In that scene, we want stuff to happen. We want moments to happen, story beats, because when we replay that scene, we get to modify those story beats to fit in with maybe the genres we select. So rather than jumping into a neutral scene, which again will be about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, let's start with stuff we know already, and put our own little twist on it. So do an improvised fairy tale, but do it based on a fairy tale that exists. Just put your own little spin on it. So, we got Cinderella. Cinderella's a great fairy tale because it has a lot of story beats that everybody's very familiar with. I'll go through Cinderella as though it was an improvised scene in 4 scenes. Scene number 1, Cinderella is scrubbing the floor, doing all the cleaning, and the evil stepsisters are yelling at her, making her feel bad because she can't go to the ball. Scene number 2, Cinderella's maybe in her bedroom, sad because she can't go to the ball. And then bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, we got the fairy godmother doing all of her magic to get her ready for the ball. And then scene number 3, Cinderella arrives at the ball looking fancy, but the prince is there too. So they share a little dance, but boom, 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 it is midnight. Cinderella's gotta run off and leaves that slipper. And then scene number 4, we have the prince coming to Cinderella's residence with that glass slipper, trying it on with the evil stepsisters. Oh, it doesn't fit, and then boom, it finally fits, and we end on that conclusion of the prince and Cinderella getting together. That's the story of Cinderella. You got the neutral scene, now let's play the game, which means you're gonna get your suggestions from the audience. Again, emotions, accents, genres. I'm gonna focus on genres right now, but emotions are super fun. So if you were to do emotions or accents, you would generally get 3 or 4 based on how many people were in the scene and give them all a different emotion or to give them all a different accent. It would be really fun to see that scene if Cinderella was, ecstatic, the prince was angry, the stepsisters were maybe, confused, and the fairy godmother was constipated. Something along those lines. That's funny just talking about it. So do whatever works for you. So if you were to get genres, you might get stuff like sci-fi, horror, western. Let's take western for right now. In the neutral scene, there were moments, which we are gonna call anchor points, anchors. These anchors are big moments that were maybe physical or emotional, just the thing that you remember the most about that neutral scene. Usually they're the things you remember the most about Cinderella without even improvising it. So let's go through a few of those. Let's start with maybe like a really memorable one when the fairy godmother casts her spell on Cinderella and gives her like a dress or turns the pumpkin into a carriage. So how can we take the genre of Western and put it over the audience's eyes and your eyes as well and modify that moment, that anchor point to make it more Western? So there's so many ways you could go about it. An example might be, instead of using a magical wand, maybe the fairy godmother has a very Western character or Western voice, and maybe uses a whip, Yeah, bibbidi-bobbidi-boo. Oh, something along those lines. That's an example. You can do whatever works. Let's move to a different one. So the ball, for example. Now the ball, like the setting, the location can also change. Maybe the ball is like an actual saloon. And there's like even that old-timey saloon pianist over there in the corner playing that old ragtime song. And also like Cinderella and the prince, they dance, right? And usually it's like a little waltz or a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Maybe they square dance. That's a way you can go about it. And then the slipper, the slipper is no longer a glass slipper. Maybe it's a spur, a cowboy boot with a spur. That's how you modify the game. You inject the personality of the genre into the personality of the neutral scene. When you are replaying the neutral scene, just know that you do have creative freedom, okay? Don't feel bound to that neutral scene. It is merely the inspiration that you're using. So, I'll be honest, like the scene might go in different directions. So like horror, for example, it's kind of hard to follow the main story beats of Cinderella using horror. It's gonna change it, right? The prince might be a killer, or the fairy godmother might be like a paranormal spirit from Paranormal Activity, that type of thing, right? And it does oftentimes modify the location, the emotional response of the characters. Like Cinderella would probably be more like, scared or terrified of the things happening around her, which could cause the scene maybe to go in different directions, Maybe instead of like the midnight dong dong in a horror movie, like maybe it's just like the prince brandishes, a knife, and that causes Cinderella to like run away, and go into the woods. It can go in a lot of different directions. The genre is the thing that you're playing with in the replay, while attaching it to the moments of the neutral scene, in this case Cinderella, but again, still putting your own little unique twist on it. So be prepared to let ideas go. Your scene partners might take it in a different direction, one that maybe you wanted to stick closer to the neutral scene, but they take it into like more unknown territory that wasn't present in the neutral scene. Let it happen, okay? Let it happen, because the game of replay, we don't want to see that neutral scene done 3 times exactly with just some slight tweaks. We do want each of the scenes to stand out on their own, where they still have a connection to the neutral scene. They are still very much connected to Cinderella, but they are all equally fun to watch if you were to take out the game. Like, you could just take these 3 scenes and show them to 3 separate audiences across the world, and they would still have a fun time without, the presence of the neutral scene, the Cinderella scene. Think of the predetermined story for the neutral scene, like the fairy tale or a movie. Think those as training wheels, modifications. When you're comfortable now and you're ready to just create neutral scenes inspired by a word from the audience, awesome, go for it. Take those training wheels off. I encourage you to do that. Don't just get stuck in playing the game of fairy tale replay. Do your own thing. Make your own shit up, right? But practice with that, okay? It's always just modifications. Get the beats into your head to the point where you start improvising scenes. You're gonna start to recognize big beats, big moments. Again, physical. Like that's what you want to do in this game, especially the last like moments of the scene. Like if there was a scene about lovers who are on the beach and then they're accosted by a bully from high school, and there's physical moments that happen in there that we can modify. Like driving to the beach, this motion, because if it was a Western, well, now it would turn into like a carriage. And then the bully coming in and maybe like going like this, like, hey, how's it going? And if it's a Western, well, maybe it's just like, an outlaw, with a black hat, and he's got himself like, maybe some whiskey, or he's got his revolver that he's spinning around. That's another thing to modify. And that last moment too. Maybe the last moment is, there's 2 last moments where like, the heroic person in the couple like punches the bully, and the bully like goes, ah! That's a moment that can easily become a duel maybe. And then there's maybe a proposal. That could be also something, a way to end the scene. And that's the fun in this game, is taking moments but also putting a spin on it and finding new ways to approach these moments, rather than just thinking, oh, this scene's done. Let's move on to something else. Hey, let's focus on the same thing we just did, but find different spins on it, using these genres, emotions, and accents. Have some fun with the game of replay. And that concludes this episode of MUT Tips. Thank you so much for checking it out. If you enjoyed the video, again, like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that bell, and I'll check you out next time for another episode of MUT Tips. Bye!